All right, I got good news, bad news, and great news in that order. The good news is we've made it to August, which means we're 1 month closer to the start of the NBA season. The bad news is we're in August, which is the worst month for NBA basketball, period. It is the true off-season time, the dead time, the quiet time. So this is going to be a month where we're not hearing too much about the Sacramento Kings, so we have to create conversation and get through it together. But now here's the great news. We got Tristy Rodriguez from NBC Sports Bay Area joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Tristy covers the Sacramento Kings. We're going to discuss offense versus defense. How far can the offense alone take the Sacramento Kings? We'll break it down right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Ooh, new intro sounding crisp there. Shout out Scott Moak, of course, the legendary PA announcer for the Sacramento Kings. Can't wait to hear him back inside the Golden One Center very soon. Welcome into the Locked On Kings podcast, your hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The playoffs are over. Like I said, we are in the dead time of the NBA season. Sports just aren't sports in the way that we want them to right now, even with football over the horizon. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And if you listened to the Locked On Kings podcast last year, you know how much of a conversation on this show the offense versus defense debate was. And you know, more often than not, even though the Kings improved defensively and they deserve a ton of credit for that, and Mike Brown deserves a ton of credit for that, you know how many times I brought up on this show, are the Kings sacrificing too much on the offensive end to improve defensively? Lo and behold, the Kings win 2 fewer games. They missed the playoffs. I'm not saying that's all because the offense was worse or took a step back, but obviously the offense was not the same, and it doesn't surprise me that the Kings didn't have the same level of success because of that. We went through the majority of an offseason now where the Kings have made their biggest moves, and the majority of those moves are offensively driven. So once again, this Kings roster is loaded with offensive weapons. They absolutely have defensive talent, but offensively, the best version of the Sacramento Kings is typically going to be on that side of the floor. We know Mike's philosophy on offense can only take you so far. Defense is what you need to ultimately carry you through to accomplish the ultimate prize of winning an NBA championship. But if the Kings are refocusing on the offensive end, how far can that alone take them? Tristy Rodriguez from NBC Sports Bay Area joins me right now to discuss just that. Been too long since we've had the wonderful Tristy Rodriguez here on the Locked On Kings podcast, so we had to get her back. Tristy, fresh back from a trip to New York, doing a good job killing her time during this off-season dead period. Tristy Rodriguez with NBC Sports Bay Area, their Sacramento Kings reporter and contributor. So Tristy has to make the trek from the Bay to the Golden One Center on a regular basis, but she does a fantastic job with her coverage over there. Tristy, welcome back to Locked On Kings. Hope your off-season is treating you well. Are you as impatient as I am to see this season come back just because we want to see DeMar DeRozan in a Kings uniform?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's a little more exciting because we have something to look forward to, that the Kings actually did something exciting. But so a little different from last season to this offseason. But yeah, I feel like we've reached that period, the trenches of the offseason. But I think it makes it all worth it that we have something to look forward to in DeMar DeRozan and the Kings.
You were with me and with the rest of the Kings media in the Mike Brown media scrums and then in the press conference room where we heard over and over again over the last year and some change about Mike talking about the importance of defense. And he's emphasized the Sacramento Kings, their offense can only take them so far. He has no interest in being a team that scores a lot of points. gets into the playoffs and then ultimately flames out because defensively they couldn't hold their own. So I don't expect things to suddenly change and for Mike to drop that side and drop that fundamental belief in what it takes to be successful in the NBA. But if you look at the moves that the Sacramento Kings made this offseason, maybe Devin Carter is the only one that you can point to go, okay, there's like a defensive-minded move. Everything else, the addition of DeMar DeRozan, bringing Malik Monk back, this is still a roster that is primarily offensively focused. So do you think it's fair to say that the Kings are refocusing, or rather, do you think the Kings should refocus their attention back on getting their offense to the level that it was 2 seasons ago when they were amongst the best in the NBA and they actually made the playoffs?
Do I think they should is different than what I think Mike Brown has in store for them. I think Mike Brown will never not make defense the priority. And that's even with DeMar DeRozan. And yes, I don't think the Kings are going to be a great defensive team next season, but I do think they will be better. I think they took those steps towards being a good defensive team towards, like, I don't know, the last 2 months of last season. Of course, that aligns with the emergence of Keon Ellis into the rotation. But also, I think we talk a lot about Keon being a factor into that, which he was, but like DeAaron improved defensively, Keegan improved defensively. And I think it's going to take guys like that to make those defensive leaps. I think they are a little more locked in. Mike, I don't know. Us as media, like you said, we were in those media scrums hearing Mike Brown preach defense. And we hear that, maybe only a couple times a week. These players are hearing it, I don't know how many times a day. So at some point, it has to register for the players. And I do think they have to find an identity and they have to pick one, right? So 2 seasons ago, it was the offense, it was DHOs, it was the 3-point shooting, all of that great historic offense. I think they could still work towards bringing that back while still focusing on the defense, if that makes sense. And I think DeMar will help with, helping things be great offensively again. And I think Kevin Huerter, didn't have the best season last season, but I think he's due for, a comeback season. And enter also Keegan coming into year 3. He's only going to get better. So I think it's manageable. I think that they can, I would be surprised if they didn't become a better defensive team next season, but I also would be surprised if they weren't close to what they were offensively 2 seasons ago.
I'm not trying to create any kind of drama or narrative here. I'm just more reading the tea leaves of the situation over the last couple of years. And I'll ask you, Tristy, do you think there is any sort of disconnect between Mike Brown and how he wants to lead the team versus Monte McNair and the Kings front office and how they want to build the team? Because you go back to even the trade deadline last year and you have the Kings ultimately not making any moves, and Monte McNair takes the podium and he says, like, offensively, we need to get back to where we were. Offensively, we need to improve. We need to get better. And it's not that Mike was refusing to work on the offense. That's not the case at all. He just obviously was trying to focus on improving the defense and said himself he wouldn't mind. He'd be okay with sacrificing some of the offense in order to improve the defense, which ultimately somehow he got that team last year to be a top 15 defense right in the middle of the pack, which is pretty impressive in its own right. Now the Kings still missed the playoffs, so they have to take that into account. But then you have, again, this offseason where here's another opportunity. The Kings recommit to Mike Brown. They sign him to a contract extension, so they believe in what he's doing here. And then they don't necessarily go out and get the pieces that, in theory, you would think Mike would want. Not that he doesn't want DeMar DeRozan, not that he didn't want Malik Monk back. Those are absolutely huge pickups for the Kings. But this team still has not really done the work, or the front office has not done the work to bring in the defensive bodies that I think Mike has been searching for over the last 2 years. So do you think there could be any kind of disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff, or is it Monty's just building with the pieces that are available to him?
It's kind of hard to say. To me, it just feels like a pick your poison type thing. I don't know if I would go as far to say there's a disconnect between Mike and Monty. It just feels like Mike is doing the best he can with what he's dealt. Mm-hmm. And yes, they went and got DeMar DeRozan this offseason. Doesn't help their defense whatsoever. However, with a coach like Mike Brown, who entered the team 2 years ago, turned DeAaron Fox into a great defender or helped him unlock those defensive abilities, I don't see why he wouldn't be able to do the same with DeMar. And DeMar's obviously a veteran. He's been in the league a long time, been around lots of great coaches and players. I don't think that, will be a problem. And also, I think you mentioned Devin Carter a little bit. Drafting him, of course, he's out for, I think, at least 6 months or something. We don't even know if we'll see him this season. But aside from that, I could argue, Jalen McDaniels, we haven't really seen much of him at the NBA level, but he's a fellow SDSU Aztec alumni, so got to ride for my guy. But there's defensive potential there, I think, and I'm not sure exactly what the Kings are going to do with him, how they'll use him, if they'll use him, but it seems like they are trying, or at least I guess you could say Monty, yes, he, didn't do much to improve the defense, but it does seem like with Keon, with DeAaron and Keegan taking defensive leaps, with Devin Carter whenever he comes back, with Jalen, and with other players also locking in because the people next to them are locking in defensively, it seems like they still can align and find that defensive intensity and that defensive identity together this season, while also, getting better with their offense.
We've already firmly established that there's no way Mike is going to throw the defense aside and fully refocus on the offense. But there's some in Sacramento. There's some around the NBA that think that the Sacramento Kings should just lean completely into the Mike D'Antoni style of just try and outscore your opponent every night, score 130 to 140 points a night, and just let that carry you as far as possible. Mike clearly feels that could probably get the Kings back into the playoffs, maybe even win a series now that DeMar DeRozan is part of this roster. But ultimately, the goal is to win a championship, and Mike doesn't think you can win a championship in the NBA with that being your MO. But I'll ask you, and we can kind of bounce back and forth and talk about it. How far do you think the Kings offense alone can take them? Because I'm of the belief that while their offense can't win them a championship by itself, the only way they're going to have a chance of winning a championship is if the offense is as lethal as it was 2 seasons ago and was as feared as it was 2 seasons ago.
Well, so 2 seasons ago, they were the number 3 seed. Last year, they didn't make the playoffs. And we saw them, they didn't necessarily get worse last season. Their offense took a dip, but their defense, trended upward. So that is kind of the perfect example to me that, yes, while defense is important, and while Mike Brown will never not emphasize the importance of getting better defensively, at least being in that, 15 or top 10 maybe goal defensively, offense is still important. And I think even a defensive-minded coach like Mike Brown understands that. And with players and shooters like Herter, Trey Lyles, Fox was shooting lights out from 3 at the beginning of last season. If their offense can get back to how it was, or even close to that as it was 2 seasons ago, and they continue to make those defensive strides. I know we're just talking about the offense here, but I think it's hard to say because also the West got better. And I feel like we say this every stinking offseason, but it's true. And it's so frustrating because it's just like, yes, the Kings got better, but also so did everybody else around them. So I don't know if you're looking for a number here, but I would say, I think they could maybe top 6 just off their offense. And that's like ceiling for me.
Okay.
I don't know. What do you think?
No, so I understand. I think the offense is capable of, if everything's hitting and most importantly, if everybody's healthy. Yes. I think this offseason, or this offense has the ability, because there's so many weapons and so many guys on any given night can go off for you. You could have a DeMar 25-year-old classic game when he was in Toronto. You could have DeAaron Fox doing what he's doing. You could have Keegan Murray randomly explode for 45 again. Malik is capable. Domantas Sabonis had 6 games where he scored 30 or more points last season, and most of them were all of them were double doubles. Most of them were triple doubles, right? So many guys, even Kevin Herter can catch fire, whether it's starting or coming off the bench. This roster is loaded with guys that at any given night can explode. But then again, like, if we're talking about a best of 7 series, who are you relying on, or you're asking DeAaron every single night to be fantastic. And I think that's just the general expectation for this season as a whole. I think the offense is capable of getting them back into that top of the Western Conference conversation, but to actually secure a spot, that offense has to be backed by defense. Because as we've seen too, which is maddeningly frustrating with this Kings team, even though they have so many offensive weapons, it feels like when everybody's on, everybody eats, right? When one guy's hot, everybody seems to kind of feed off that energy. If multiple guys are struggling, the entire team is struggling, not to mention how bad the free throw line was last year, Tristi. So to me, if you're relying on your offense, I think it's an okay approach for the Sacramento Kings to have to rely on their offense. In fact, I think it's what they need to do to go as far as they can potentially go at least next season. But there is absolutely a ceiling to how far the offense can take them. And I can only believe in Mike Brown, who's been there and done it before and who has won rings as an assistant and gotten there as a head coach. He knows what it actually takes to get there and what it takes to win there. And if he's saying offense isn't enough, Monty McNair is hopefully listening to that. And I think Kings fans need to be listening to that too.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at this team from 2 seasons ago, yeah, they're, Davion's gone. But most of the core and most of the team is almost exactly the same entering this season. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to get back to that offensive, rhythm, plus the addition of DeMar DeRozan. So it seems like, what we're saying is shouldn't be far out of reach for them. But I think, like you said, so 2 seasons ago, offense plus the second half of last season's defense could make for a playoff series and maybe even potentially a playoff run this season, in my opinion.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. We all love sports so much. Some would say too much, but you know what? Screw them. They're wrong. We love sports. We don't want them to stop. And right now, sports just aren't sportsing the way that we want them to. No disrespect to baseball, but this is the time of the year that's the toughest for a sports fan. But the good news is fall is coming, and fall means the best time for sports in our calendar year. FanDuel is helping me keep my sports fix going, though, whenever I want, because all I have to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long, to keep things fresh. Different ways to play, new bonuses. Just log in every single day and you will find something new for you. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The second half defense is what I want to focus on now, though, because, and I asked Mike this at the end of last season during his end of season press conference. I asked Mike, how sustainable is the way that you were playing defense to end last season? And Mike basically said, like, everything that the Kings were doing, he feels is sustainable, which is good. But you've also had Mike, DeAaron, I think Davion talked about it at one point in time. You've had multiple people directly point to how the game was being officiated to end last season as a reason for why the Kings started having success, which is so strange because I would think that, I mean, it's very transparent of them, which I appreciate. I would think that Mike and DeAaron would want to go, the officials don't matter. We figured some things out and we finally figured out how to play a good team defensive system together. But no, they're just going, like, the officials stopped blowing the whistle as much. Like, we were allowed to play physical, which is the way we wanted to play, which is the way that we like to play in the playoffs when they had defensive success against the Golden State Warriors 2 years ago. Like, the fact that the refereeing, the officiating is such a massive variable to how the Kings accomplished defensive success last season. When everybody says the cliche is control what you can control, you can't control the officiating. So is the Kings' defensive success really predicated on how the officials call the game? Because if we start next season and the NBA reverts back to 130 to 128 final scores and 30 trips to the foul line, Sacramento might suck again. Like that's just the reality, it feels like.
I mean, I think you said it yourself. That is the reality. But I don't, as of right now, as the rules stand, I think it's a good thing. I think Mike Brown, again, at all those media scrums, not only was it defense, it was the word we kept hearing over and over again over the past 2 years has been physicality. And it seemed like it took a year and a half or a season and a half for the guys to finally, be able to play with that physical ability and not be called for every single foul. And I will say it to be fair, it does seem like the whistle, that was league wide. So it sounded like other players everywhere were talking about it. And it's, at least from my understanding, it seems like the players like it, or they're enjoying it, as long as, it's being called both ways, of course, but it never is. But yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think, of course, if they're riding on, you never want a team to like ride on the officials or depend on anyone but themselves. But I think they're trending in the right way. And I think they're finally living up to what Mike Brown has been preaching for the past 2 seasons.
DeAaron Fox got to the line just shy of 6 attempts a game last season. I think we're both in agreement that Fox, although to be fair, last season he had a significantly higher volume of threes and spent less time getting downhill and trying to get to the rim. I think we feel DeAaron Fox deserves to get to the line more. You see Jalen Brunson, you see Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and how much these two get to the line. And then you watch them play and you compare them to how DeAaron Fox plays, and what jumps off the page is those two guys are really, really good at, for lack of a better term, foul baiting. Like they know how to sell a call. They know how to create contact, and it works for them. I think DeAaron's been asked about it before, and DeAaron said, like, that's not my game. I don't have interest in flopping. I don't have interest in it. In fact, Tristy, you and I both know that DeAaron will call guys out for flopping on the floor all the time. We've put together video compilations of it. We love it. I love every time DeAaron uses his body to call out flopping, and he does it all the time. So DeAaron is not someone who believes in throwing your head back or flailing in order to get a foul call.
The Luka Doncic-ing.
Exactly, 100%. But should he maybe try a little bit? Like if it helps a little bit, if you can get to the foul line a little bit more, not that guarantees much because the Kings were so bad from the free throw line last season, but should DeAaron maybe consider, hey, maybe a little throw the head back every once in a while just to get a few more whistles that he deserves?
I mean, I was just going to say that what's the point if you don't make your free throws? Sorry, but
true. That's true. Yeah.
And it seemed like, I don't know if this is just something that I noticed, but like towards the end of last season, it seemed like Fox was letting it get to him a little bit more, and he was kind of trending that way. And he, arguing with the refs a little bit here and there. And I think it was just the frustrations of the season and how they ended that season horribly. And, the injuries of Malik and Kevin and just all these factors that were coming into play with the playoff race just getting tighter. And it just seemed like he was a little bit more frustrated. So like, whining and complaining didn't help in that sense. You're the star on your team. You need to get back on defense. You need to stop complaining. You're the leader. Like, don't complain. To start the season, I would say go for it. Do it. Yeah. Complain. Do all the dramatics. You do it so well imitating others, so why not?
Continuing with talking about DeAaron Fox, the DeAaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan combination is very exciting. There's so many duos on this roster that we're going to be able to talk about, from Fox and DeRozan to Fox and Domas, obviously, to Malik and Domas, even DeRozan and Domas, Domas and Kevin, really Domas and anybody because he plays well with everybody. Keegan and Fox. Like, there's so many different duos that are exciting to see how they compare together. And then essentially this team is a core 5, right? It's Fox, it's Sabonis, it's DeRozan, it's Keegan, and it's Malik Monk. And then everybody else on top of that can hopefully contribute and turn into more. But the topic of who takes the last shot is going to be something that we bring up and discuss, and it's going to be debated over the course of the season. Now, thankfully, we're talking about 2 guys in DeAaron and DeMar that I don't think care. Like, as long as the shot goes in, I don't think they care that much. So now we're talking strategic more than player demands, right? DeAaron will give the ball. We already know Domantas Sabonis will give the ball up down the stretch, maybe too much. Like, shoot it yourself, Domas. But let's just talk about, it's game 1 of the season, right? And the game is tied, 6 seconds left. Kings have the ball on an inbound. Anybody can take that shot, and normally you have to have a plan B and a plan C and plan D. But who are you drawing plan A up for? You drawing it up for DeAaron, or are you drawing it up for DeMar and his experience, let's just say, as a veteran in that spot?
I'm drawing it up for whoever has the better game, whoever's having the better game, whoever's shooting more efficiently, whoever's, has the hot hand. And maybe that's not even DeAaron or DeMar. It could be Keegan. Yeah, exactly. So I've thought about this a lot. I've had conversations with people about it too. And it's the best thing about it is it's not a bad problem to have, because I feel like last year was so much on DeAaron. His whole career has been so much on DeAaron. And now he finally has that guy that can go and get a bucket in the fourth or in the clutch in the final possession, whatever it is. It's not so much relying on him, and it's going to be a nightmare for defenses, which I'm so excited for. But yeah, I think like you said it best. The best thing also about it is that neither of them are divas. They don't frankly just care who gets it, and they're more just team players. They want the win, and whoever it is, go get it.
I had the opportunity to when I interviewed DeMar after his press conference in the Golden One Center, I asked him, like, what does a defense do if you and Fox are on the floor at the same time to take that last shot? Like, how do you stop that? And DeMar just straight up said, I don't think you can, right? Because you've got to be so worried about both of these guys at any given time. And I'll tell you, Tristy, and I know you're very familiar with DeMar DeRozan's game with the amount of time he spent in the Eastern Conference playing against your Miami Heat. So I know you're very familiar with him. What excites me about DeMar, and I always notice this watching him play throughout his career, but really diving into the film, this man needs no space, right? People talk about, spacing. It's going to be a spacing issue because he doesn't stretch the floor. Well, number one, DeAaron Fox now can stretch the floor freely, and he can shoot his 7 to 8 threes a game. And now the Kings have a mid-range presence outside of that, which is great. But DeMar DeRozan can get double teamed and still pull up and hit a mid-range jumper without issue. Turnaround jumper, creating off the dribble, does not matter. That man needs zero space to operate. He's also a very underrated passer when he faces double teams. That's something that I'm excited to see in this Kings offense, and how specifically, Tristy, it bails them out, right? Because last season and over the last 2 seasons, if the Kings tried to get into their defense or offensive sets and it broke down and there's 6 seconds on the shot clock, it was, oh God, DeAaron, save us. That was it. Yeah. Now it's, okay, get the ball to DeMar or DeAaron, but especially DeMar. DeMar can be triple teamed. He can still hit a shot at a high frequency. I'm really excited to see that in person.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally excited just by that breakdown that you just gave. I also think just having DeAaron and DeMar as options opens up opportunities for literally everybody else on the floor. Because like you said, those 2 guys are already just going to get a lot of attention. Maybe Keegan's open in the corner, and it also just, I'm excited to see how Keegan adapts to not having so much, I don't want to call it pressure, but just, entering a sophomore season, it was Keegan's sophomore leap, and then it's like year 3 jump, and now it's like, maybe now with all the focus on DeMar and DeAaron, I think Keegan's obviously still very important to this team. Sure. And his development will be very important to this team as, developing into a great 2-way player. But it gives him a little bit more freedom and, I don't know, like, to develop behind the scenes and kind of in the shadows, whilst learning from greats like DeMar DeRozan and DeAaron Fox still. So I kind of went off track there, but I think just having that threat of DeMar and DeAaron on the floor is going to open up opportunities for literally everybody else that's on the court with them.
I love the direction you took it too, because I'm firmly of the belief that this is only a good thing for Keegan Murray. I know there are some people that are concerned about, how do you incorporate Keegan into this? You got to make sure Keegan has the ball in his hands. The Kings still would like Keegan to develop as a 3-level scorer and as a guy that can create his own shot and not just be a catch and shoot merchant. But next season, if that's what Keegan's primary role is, he showed as a rookie he can excel at that role. So, like you said, it takes the pressure off of Keegan to be that. But there are going to be nights, like we saw last season, where Keegan is that dude. And when he has those nights, and hopefully they're more frequent than they were last season, then the Kings need to do the right thing, and Keegan needs to do the right thing and demand the ball and get him the ball more. Because that was an issue from last season that I saw. And I think DeMar DeRozan is smart enough to recognize, heck, he did it in Chicago. He's done it in many times in his career. Okay, I'm a dude, but I need to get the ball to my guy because he's red hot tonight, and we need to do that throughout the entire game. So I'm excited for that for Keegan. And then Tristy, I don't know about you. I went into this offseason expecting Kevin Huerter to be gone. I thought the writing was on the wall. I thought there was a clear disconnect between Kevin and Mike, and I make sure to preface that by saying there's no animosity between the two. As far as I know, there's a tremendous amount of respect between the two of them, but the direction Mike was going and how Kevin Huerter is as a player, I just think weren't meshing. They weren't gelling. The Kings were asking for more out of Kevin. God bless him. He was trying, but defensively, he has his clear limitations with just the way that he plays. That being said, Tristy, I think his role is simplified to a T now. And if he executes his role well or perfectly, we're talking about a guy that absolutely has a spot on a really good team here in Sacramento. And that's simply just being I call it a perimeter poacher. Your job is just to space the floor. And when you get an open shot, because you're going to get a lot of them, you just got to knock them down at a 38, 39, 40% clip. You do that, you have value. And I think a simplified role for Keegan, or excuse me, for Kevin, even Keegan too, but Kevin is going to be way better considering how in his own head he looked to be last season.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. I also thought it was a little uncertain about his future in Sacramento. But after the DeRozan addition, I do feel, I agree completely with what you just said. I feel like it frees him up a little bit to do or to play his game instead of trying so hard to catch up and play Mike Brown's game. Mm-hmm. And again, like I'm really big on Kevin Huerter. I do think he's due for a bounce back season. He's proven to be a great shooter. And like you said too, like he was trying, there were nights I would just watch him for like 2 minutes, just him, 3 minutes on the floor. And he was, bless his heart, trying so hard to keep up defensively when he was having off shooting nights. And you could see he was trying. He was, getting a body on them and, using his length and trying. But, some people are just limited in their abilities. Mm-hmm. But he really did try. And even, at his end of the season presser, it just, his tone was kind of, like, I know that I didn't have the best season, but I tried. And, I'm trying to become a better, like when I'm not scoring, I'm trying to help in other ways. And you saw that. You did see that. Even if it didn't show on, stat sheets, like for me, at least, I saw the effort. And yeah, I agree. I think that with a little less pressure from Mike Brown on Kevin this season, I think he can get back to doing what he wants to do and play freely and hopefully, have the same type of effect that he did 2 seasons ago.
Tristy, one of the last things I want to ask you is this, and I'm not going to share my opinion because I don't want to influence your choice or your opinion at all. Who's going to start, I think, is going to be a massive conversation in training camp. I know who I want to start. You might have already heard it, or I don't know if we've had conversations about this before. But in your mind, if you're Mike Brown and tomorrow is game 1 of the season against whoever, who's your starting 5 in Sacramento right now?
You're trying to get messy, Matt. You're trying to get messy. I've played this over and over in my head.
Yep.
Since they've signed DeRozan. I think it should be Fox, Keon, DeMar, Keegan, and Domas.
Okay.
I would love to see Malik start. I think that's obviously what he's wanting. He said that openly, freely. Who doesn't, right? But Malik is just, when Mike Brown would always say, he's the 6th guy. He's that guy. Like, that's just, like, I was just like, no, like, start him. Like,
right.
It took me a while to buy into that.
Yeah.
After seeing it for the past 2 seasons, I totally get it. And I think he, as much as he wants to start, I think he embraces being that person for the Kings. And, when De'Aaron needs a break or De'Aaron's having an off night or whatever, enter Malik Monk. And there's literally no, like, even if he's not having a great shooting night, he has the energy all the time, game in, game out. And so that's my starting 5. I think Keon, we saw it. The numbers don't lie. We saw how how much better they were defensively when Keon was in the lineup. I'm a little worried about you. I was watching him summer league. Obviously, the Kings, Mike Brown said he wanted to see how he was doing with the ball in his hand a little bit more. He won't really have to worry about that too much with DeAaron on the floor, and he can just kind of be a shooter. But his defense helps so much, and I think at least to start the season, they should try and experiment that. And I think that's exactly what Mike Brown's going to do. He has options, which is never a bad thing. So whether that be Keon, Malik, Kevin, I think Mike Brown will have fun experimenting that. And I think it's a little fun to have the guys compete for the job a little bit. We'll see in training camp. It's nice to have the depth, but I do think as of now that Keon should be that 2 guard.
It's a good problem to have for sure. It's funny, Tristy. I've been on kind of an opposite journey from you, because when we heard Malik Monk being the 6th man in that 6-man role for the first season and a half, I was 100% behind it. In fact, I defended it to the end of the earth. I'm like, no, bring Malik off the bench, the Energizer Bunny, what he brings, that 6th man of the year potential. Like that's so good and so necessary to this Kings team. And now I've transitioned and gotten to a point, Tristy, where I'm like, he's one of your 5 best players. If not, he's a top 4 player on this Kings team. Like, just start the guy. And I think a big reason for why I've changed has actually been Mike's rotations, because Mike already staggers his rotations so much to where one of Fox or Sabonis are on the floor. It's crazy to me, Tristan. I don't know if you noticed this too. DeAaron Fox is the first guy that Mike subs out of the game every single night. And it's because of his rotation. It's not because Fox is tired or anything like that. It's because that's how he staggers his lineup. Your best player is the first guy to come to the bench, typically around the like 7 minutes into the game, around like the 4 to 5 minute mark. Fox comes out and usually Malik comes in. You can still stagger your rotations to where Malik can still work with the second unit while Fox is getting a breather and stuff like that. But I would love to see what we already know. Malik's probably going to be on the floor for part of your closing lineup. Mm-hmm. But I want to see what the first 5 minutes looks like of that Kentucky backcourt pedal to the metal with DeRozan and Keegan and Sabonis out there. Because I think that could be a way for, you talk about starting strong, Sacramento could have that potential. But ultimately, like, this is a fun debate topic for us to have here. Mike might go with Kevin Huerter just because it's familiar. He might go with Keon because Keon earned it the way he played at the end of last season. It's a great problem to have, and it's going to be a lot of fun for us to talk about and debate and pay attention to come preseason.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, it's a fun debate to have. It's hard to argue that. I wouldn't be mad if Malik Monk was a starting 2 guard. Let's just put that out there. Totally think he deserves it. Him coming back was crazy. So I think he's definitely deserving of that. I guess, like you said, Keon just kind of, to me, was like a numbers thing, and defense obviously is, it depends on how Mike Brown's trying to approach the season. If defense is what he's going for, if it's offense, then I think that also kind of plays a factor into what he does.
100%. If Keon's playing good defense and he's capable of stretching the floor and knocking down threes at a respectable clip, it's going to be hard to get him off the floor too, because he does everything that the Kings need. But also, I think a good thing about Keon too is I think Keon can play with anybody and contribute the same way. Like, I think that's one of the most valuable parts about a Keon Ellis, is he doesn't need to be with certain players on the floor to be successful. He just is him, and him is probably pretty good for this Kings team going forward. So we'll have to see. Well, Tristy, I'm sure that's one of the many topics that you're going to be writing about and talking about at NBC Sports Bay Area. Before I let you go, just what can Kings fans expect from you and your team over there as we get closer to training camp and throughout the season itself? Because I know you're at the Golden One Center. I know you're putting in the work, but what kind of stuff are you guys working on over there?
Yeah, so we have lots of exciting things coming this offseason. I've actually just had a one-on-one with my boss yesterday about a couple offseason columns and analysis pieces I'm working on for the Kings before training camp, post-training camp. So definitely keep an eye on NBCSportsBayArea.com. And you can find me, Tristy Rodriguez, on all social media. Lots of exciting things coming. And then in 2 seasons, obviously not this season, next season, NBA will be returning to NBC, so that's exciting. And we're already kind of dipping our toes into what we want to do with our Kings and Warriors coverage. So stay tuned. Should be exciting.
Well, we're okay with the Kings coverage. We don't need to worry about the Warriors coverage or anything. We're only focused on good teams in the Western Conference, so we'll focus on the Kings stuff. Tristy is locked in with the King stuff all the time, of course. And if you don't read Tristy's work, you need to, because I promise you'll learn something. Tristy's all over everything. So Tristy, thank you so much for taking the time here on Locked On Kings. We can't make this as irregular as it's been. I got to get you back very, very soon, maybe around training camp time for us to debate that starting lineup more during the season as well. We'll get you on here as a regular. I know the listeners would appreciate it.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Matt.